Okay, guys. Now we will begin our session. Hello, I'm Park from Changwon University, and it's my great pleasure to be with you today. And I hope you guys can run and communicate so many things about AI with, especially on perspective of humanities. So I introduce our presenters. So first one, Bonnie. He is a professor of University College Dublin. Let's applaud. Second presenter, Marcin Galinsky. He is a professor of the Jacob of Paradise University in Bordeaux, Poliski. Thank you. And third, Maro Kim. He is a professor of the Academy of Foreign Studies. Finally, John Jun, professor of type. In discussion, Meng is not here, but I hope he will come as soon as possible. So, firstly, would you present your presentation? Tony Bill.
I certainly will, thank you. Hello everyone, it's great to be here. It's always great to be in Korea. I'm going to talk today about irony, which is an unusual subject for computer scientists to be talking about. Hopefully it's something that you humanities scholars will be interested in. Irony is of growing importance in computer science because so much of what we do is now mediated by language models, and irony is a pervasive aspect of human language communication. Machines need to know how to generate it to be more natural, and they certainly need to know how to understand it when communicating with very ironic and often sarcastic human beings. So I want to talk about how we can experimentally test the capacity of language models to understand and produce irony. And it's not just about getting computers to be better at irony. I think by studying irony from a computational perspective, we can use computers so that we ourselves can better understand what it is to be ironic as a human being. Okay, so if I were to ask you all individually for your definition of irony, I'm sure I would get at least one unique definition per person in the room. It is a very unstable phenomenon. I'm going to define it from an operational point of view as a downshift in context of the perceived sentiment or connotation of an idea. So the model that I presented some years ago was called EPIC, the expected value of a property P of an instance I of a concept C in context. And this property by default has a high sentiment, but when used ironically in an ironic context, there's a downshift in the perceived sentiment, and that is a measurable phenomenon, that downshift. And the extent of the downshift is the degree to which we can be confident that irony has been invoked. Irony is pervasive in human language, and it can work at many different levels, the level of entire stories to the level of individual word choice. So we're not going to solve the problem universally. We need a relatively simple fruit fly of a construction that we can use to study irony. And the construction I'm interested in computational metaphor, analogy, blending. The construction I'm going to use is the XYZ schema in linguistics. This is very pervasive in English. I see no reason why it shouldn't exist in Korean. Syntactically, it's certainly supported. XYZ is when you say X is the Y of Z. Right? So if I was to say Donald Trump is the Kim Jong-un of American politics, you think you'd all understand what I mean. Conversely, I could say that Kim Jong-un is the Donald Trump of the Korean Peninsula, and you'd know what I mean. Now, notice how I'm using Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un as categories rather than as individuals. Right? They're individuals, but I'm assuming that there's a category of individuals that I can draw from. There's a category error at the heart of the figurative X, Y, Z. It's essentially a marked metaphor. It's very unusual. Metaphors typically aren't marked. It has the structural marking of a simile and analogy, but it's essentially a metaphor. Here's an XYZ that was generated by a language model. Donald Trump is the Albert Einstein of diplomacy. You can tell that this is clearly ironic, right? We associate Albert Einstein with high levels of intellectual achievement and personal intelligence, and these are qualities that are completely bereft in the target of this description, X. Right, so in this case, the language model has done a good job of generating an ironic XYZ construction. So we're going to test the ability of language models to generate and to recognize irony in these creative forms, XYZ constructions. They're figurative. Obviously, when I say that Emmanuel Macron is the president of France, that's an XYZ structure, but it's not figurative, it's quite literal. In the figurative examples, the Y is an individual used as a category, okay, to give us a metaphorical foundation. So we've got the X maps to Y, and the domain of X maps to the domain of Z. Sorry, the domain of Y. Okay. So back in 2012, actually I was in Korea at the time, I started collecting a corpus of human XYZ constructions from the web, when it was still possible to automate searches over Google and to collect these on a large scale. And we collected just over 2,000 figurative XYZs from the web. I'm going to refer to these as the web XYZs. And being the web, being the internet, they were very politically focused. There's a lot of problematic elements to the data. It's still quite interesting. And a number of figures that were commonplace in 2012 are still commonplace today. Right? So the most common Y, that is the descriptor, metaphoric descriptor, was Chuck Norris. You do not want to be compared to Chuck Norris. He's tough but incredibly unintelligent, right? Back in 2012, Barack Obama was a very commonplace X. Barack Obama is the Y of Z. We also had Woody Allen, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was still alive at the time. Alex Jones, Kanye West, they're still knocking around causing trouble, right? Michael Jordan, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is interesting in that he's a commonplace X and he's a commonplace Y. And the domains of these comparisons were things like the 21st century, the NFL, the Republican Party, the left, the right, and so on. They were very, very much political comparisons. Now, the human data is quite interesting in a number of respects. Some of these XYZs that we found on the web from human creators were really quite creative. And they follow this pattern where they're quite an enigma wrapped in a riddle. You really have to think and scratch your head to figure out some of them. Here's one that troubled me. Red meat is the Donald Trump of cancer. This is from 2012. What's the meaning of this? Well, you have to go look at the author's intentions. Irony is often veiled and complex. And the intention here is that Donald Trump is an aggressive builder. If you've seen the news, he's just knocked down the east wing of the White House, and cancer knocks down the east wing of the human body, so to speak, right? So red meat is an aggressive builder of cancer. If you want to compare to an aggressive builder, pick an aggressive builder like Donald Trump. So this is quite a creative comparison. And humans, as we know, tend to be creative, though not as creative on the whole as we like to imagine when we're denigrating machine creativity. Okay, so we have our data set comparison of human data, and we want to now generate machine XYZs to see if they rank similarly creative and have similar properties. So The way we did this was we asked the language models to generate XYZs in a variety of very high-level meta-domains, such as science, sports, arts, and politics. We didn't want to give them specific people to work on. We wanted the language model to suggest its own X's, its own Y's, and for the large part, its own Z's. And this is the data that we got from OpenAI's GPT 3.5. which at the time we did this work was the language model behind ChatGPT. And we see that the most common X is Elon Musk. You really can't avoid this guy, right? The most common Y is William Shakespeare. And the most common Z is international diplomacy. Right, so you might say that, let's have a look here. Neil deGrasse Tyson is the Leonardo da Vinci of the science podcast. Right? So this is the kind of thing that we were getting. So as I said, we got about over 1,000 from the language model, the standard language model behind ChatGPT. And we notice a number of things. On the left here, you can see the red X's. This is the human data. And the interesting thing about the human data is that the X's, the people being described by the XYZs, are almost overwhelmingly male. There's a huge male focus on internet chat, right? There's also a tremendous conservativity in human XYZs. X's are compared to Y's of the same gender almost always. So men are compared to men, women are compared to women. It's rare to see a man compared to a woman or a woman compared to a man, though comparing a man to a woman is less rare than comparing a woman to a man. Yeah, there's a lot of social convention and sexism bound up in this. We also noticed that the XYZs were conservative in terms of domain. Politicians tend to be compared to politicians in human data, actors to actors, sports people. They tend to be in-domain comparisons, which are not very creative. Comparing Obama to Clinton or comparing George W. Bush to Reagan, that's not very creative. Whereas the out-of-domain comparisons are quite rare. We notice that in the machine-generated comparisons, there's a better gender balance, even though still men outnumber women 2-to-1. And the in-domain comparisons are slightly less. Okay. So, but still, we find that most of the human comparisons are in-domain and most of the machine comparisons are cross-domain, which suggests more creativity to my mind. Okay. So far all we've asked is the machine to generate creative XYZs. Now we want to see if it can generate ironic comparisons. So we give the language model an example of an ironic comparison. We say, for instance, that Vladimir Putin is the Dalai Lama of world politics, right? Of course, nothing could be further from the truth, and that's the idea here. This is a rather in-your-face ironic comparison. It's so ironic, it's practically sarcastic. And then we ask the system to generate more XYZs in the same vein. And again, we see Donald Trump turns up a lot in the data, Elon Musk, Kanye West, Taylor Swift, all of the usual suspects. By the way, everyone on a language model is famous. If you were to look at real human data, you'll see XYZs about people you don't know, because people have friends who are not famous, whereas machines don't know anybody that isn't famous. It's a little quirk of the data. Again, Mother Teresa, William Shakespeare, Banksy turn up a lot. If you want to say that an artist is bad, you compare him to Banksy. If you want to say that a writer is bad, you compare him to Dan Brown. And if you want to say that a singer is bad, you compare him to Kanye West. And we see that the machine-generated ironic comparisons are once again 2-to-1 in favor of male participants. There's a strong male bias, but again not as strong as in the human data. And we find that the comparisons that are generated in ironic mode are predominantly cross-domain. The irony is actually forcing the machine to be more creative. If you've ever asked a language model to be creative, I'm sure you've been disappointed by the results. The language models don't really understand the word creative. They associate it with surprise, or they think creativity to be the topic more than the mode of generation. If you want a language model to be creative, don't ask it to be creative, ask it to be ironic. And here's the data again: Donald Trump, Kanye West, the usual suspects turn up, right? Sorry, what's the because I'm going backwards on the slides. If we ask the language model to label the dominant emotion in each comparison, for the human data, the dominant emotion behind 72% of comparisons is admiration. For the neutral XYZs, these are the ones where we're not asking the language model to be ironic. 95% of the outputs are predominantly admiring. And even for the ironic examples, 69% of them, the dominant emotion is admiration. Why is that? Because irony disguises an insult as a compliment. It's not a very effective piece of irony if you can immediately tell that something is insulting. You have to disguise it as a compliment with a hidden needle or a hidden piece of glass in the middle of the text, right? So the superficial emotion is admiration for ironic texts, but the hidden meaning is negative. You get chewing and then you realize, oh my God, there's glass in this. We can quantify the levels of positivity, believability, and fairness as well, getting the language model to do the quantification for us. And we see that most of the comparisons have high levels of positivity, lower levels of believability. So, what do we mean? And you get a sense here, I'm not very fond of this person, and I'm glad that he's actually left before I arrived. But what we mean by irony, I take a definition from Sam Glucksberg and Kumar Nakamura, where they define irony in terms of pragmatic insincerity. You are insincere in what you say, but you are insincere in a way that is designed to be recognized by the listener. When you lie effectively, you're insincere effectively. When you're ironic, you're insincere ineffectively. People recognize your insincerity and take the opposite generally of what you do. So what we want for a good ironic construction is low believability and high positivity. If the reader can see, this is very positive, but not at all believable, they can reconstruct the intended meaning. If it's high believability, then you failed as an ironist. Here are some examples from the language model. Conor McGregor is the Mother Teresa of sportsmanship. I get the sense Conor McGregor is quite popular over here. He's not at all popular in Ireland. He failed to run for president there, luckily. So he is not the Mother Teresa of sportsmanship. He is the opposite. He's a poor loser. McDonald's is the Marie Curie of healthy eating. McDonald's has nothing to do with healthy eating. Okay. Lady Gaga is the Jane Austen of understatement. There's one for the humanities scholars in the room, right? Jane Austen is understated. Lady Gaga is not. Industrial agriculture is the Godzilla of the countryside. That's not a successful piece of irony. It's a piece of angry metaphor, but it doesn't actually disguise its meaning or invert its meaning in any way. So when we look at the gross properties of the human data, we see that on average the human data constitutes insincere praise. In the upper left quadrant there we have low believability, high positivity. But we've got a tremendous amount of variance. For the neutral machine-generated XYZs, most of them are sincere praise, high believability and high positivity. And of course for the ironic machine-generated XYZs, insincere praise is the norm, low believability, high positivity. Now if we try to actually get the machine to test its own outputs, we get the machine to do something for you, right? I'm sure you've all been disappointed to say, oh, only 1 in 5 times does it actually do what I want it to do. Is there some way we can get the machine to use its own criteria for success and filter its own output so I don't have to do it? Well, when we use these criteria, this is an ROC curve, the receiver operator characteristic. We see that the blue line there on the outside is the most successful discriminator. And that is 1 minus believability multiplied by positivity. So when you have low believability and high positivity, it's easy to tell that the XYZs are ironic. And when you have high believability or low positivity, it's easy to tell that they're non-ironic. And when the machine gives you something that is not so clear-cut, you say, try again. You automatically say, try again, and you get the machine to generate a higher yield of what you're looking for. If you don't do that, then 80 to 90% of what the machine generates is not actually what you asked it to generate. Okay. I don't have time to go into this. I can talk about it later if you're interested. I talked about recognizing the sentiment of the irony, but obviously the meaning of the irony is really important. When we say that Trump is the Einstein of international diplomacy, we don't mean that Trump is an influential figure in his field. We mean that he's an inept or unskilled diplomat. That's the ironic intent behind the message. And can the machine get that? Well, it can. And the difference in the sentiment between those two interpretations we call the parallax. It's quite high here. We can also compare the sentiment of being described as Albert Einstein to the sentiment of being described as inept or unskilled, and that is the downshift. And we find that there is a substantial parallax and downshift in all of the data sets, including the human data sets, which means that there's a high potential for ironic interpretation, even if the irony is not intended, which is why believability and positivity are such important cues. And the takeaway message here is that the best language model that we found was Llama 3, 70 billion, better than the larger models from OpenAI, perhaps because they have less value alignment done to them. And the final takeaway message is that irony is a classic example of thinking fast and slow in the Dan Kahneman mold. You generate something intuitively, but you then need to think about why it works as an example of what you generated. And the LLM is actually very good as a system 1 substitute. But what we've been doing here is trying to give it criteria for also acting as its own system 2 to filter its own outputs and recognizing when it has failed to do what we've asked it to do. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay, are you ready for the question?
Yes.
The second presenter, Martin Kalinski. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to thank you to organizers for possibility of delivering this paper today and outstanding organization of our World Humanities Forum. So, as you may see, today I would like to present some combination of law and philosophy, namely demonstrate that philosophical thoughts may be very useful to solution some problems through the fields of criminal law. Nowadays we have one issue. Today we are gathering to discuss about AI. So I would like to consider whether categorical imperative by Kantian categorical imperative may be philosophical foundation of punishing AI agents, or maybe that categorical imperative provides us arguments that AI cannot be subject of penalty. So, firstly, it should be observed that categorical imperative may be one of the philosophical thoughts which may be used to solving the problems associating with criminal law and AI, but due to time limitation, I would like to pay attention only to that conception. So, firstly, we must describe whether is that categorical imperative. Namely, it's maxim, one of two maxims introduced by German philosopher Immanuel Kant. The second one is a practical imperative, but I don't want to pay attention to that because time of limitation. The categorical imperative is a background of multitude of Kant's works. What is interesting, that philosopher doesn't pay attention to strict wording of that principle, because depending on his work, that categorical imperative has different meaning, different wording, to be more precise. So I would like to provide one example translated in English, what is categorical imperative. Namely, act only in accordance with that maxim through which you can at the same time with that it became universal. As you may observe, that principle is pretty unclear, maybe even obscure. It reads that plenty of Kantian interpreters understood that principle differently. But what is crucial? Firstly, Kant, also using the notion of pure practicalism, in German, kleine praktische Vernunft. What it does mean? It's some kind of reason, some kind of our thoughts which dictate us the best solution in such situation. So, human beings are fundamentally motivated to pursue the good. And reaching the good is a fundamental motivation of its activity. But what is interesting, as we think about good, we think about positive things, positive situations. But Kant thinks a little bit in different manner. Namely, for Kant, good is that what is in accordance with pure practicalism. So, it's the good in such meaning is delineated by manner of reasoning, so partially by logic. So, as we may observe, it's a pretty different definition of good, but of course it's not binding clue for interpreting. But what is important? Namely, is it true that people lead to good in common meaning or in Kantian meaning? Of course not. People are not general logic persons, so it cannot lead to good in that sense. They may lead to illusion of that general leads to illusion of such Kantian good. So, in common sense, there are cruel persons, for instance, which are not counting with feelings of other people or want to be satisfied heartily. So, in my opinion, such understanding of categorical imperative, that assuming that we are leading to good and we know what is good for us.
기존에 2015년 이전에는 사실 인문사회에서 AI라는 용어, AI, 딥러닝 뭐 이런 용어들이 거의 사용되지 않았습니다. 하지만 2015년 이후에 증가를 하더니 2022년을 2021년을 기점으로 챗GPT가 나오는데죠. 그때를 기점으로 기하가 거의 폭발적으로 증가해서 전체 인문사회 논문 중에서 약 6% 정도가 지금 AI 관련된 최소한 키워드를 타이틀 혹은 어트리뷰트 초록에 싣고 있는 것이 지금 현실입니다. 그런데 이런 논문들의 분야 분과들이 대부분 어디냐면 사회 분야에 좀 더 가깝습니다. 법학, AI 윤리 쪽이죠. 방금 발표하셨던 분도 역시 법학, 윤리, 철학 쪽에서 접근을 했는데 법학 쪽 그리고 교육학 어떻게 AI 리터러시를 함양할 것이냐 이 부분에 있어서 좀 열심히 연구를 하고 있고 또 경영학 쪽에서 앞으로 경영에 어떻게 비즈니스에 어떻게 도입을 할 것이냐 이런 거 쪽으로 많이 집중이 되어 있는 상황입니다. 아쉽게도 역사학, 철학, 문학 쪽에서는 아직 본격적으로 AI에 대해서 접근하지는 않고 있는 게 현실입니다. 그 다음에 주요 기술 키워드가 있는데요. 결국은 그냥 머신러닝, 딥러닝, 빅데이터 등등을 얘기하다가 2022년을 기점으로 다 그냥 챗GPT입니다. 거의 논문에 압도적으로 증가를 했고요. 그랬을 때 제가 좀 아쉽게 생각하는 부분은 이겁니다. AI 전체 AI 논문 중에서 데이터 혹은 로 데이터, 다시 말해서 데이터가 언급되고 있는 논문은 거의 없다고 해도 과언이 아닐 겁니다. 네, 알고리즘 중요하죠. 근데 알고리즘을 그리고 효율성을 추구하는 거는 저희 인문사회는 아닐 겁니다. 그거는 이공계에 좀 더 가깝겠죠. 저희 인문사회 쪽에서는 알고리즘 자체보다 그 알고리즘의 근간을 이루는 데이터에 대한 연구가 조금 더 있어야 되지 않을까라는 게 제 생각이고요. 그랬을 때 여기서 꼭 오해를 하는 경우가 있기 때문에 시간이 들더라도 어쩔 수 없이 말씀드릴 수밖에 없는 것이 바로 이 모델입니다. 여러분 대부분 아실 것 같은데 DIKW 모델이라고 해가지고 보통 지식의 피라미드 이런 식으로 부르는 모형이 있죠. 근데 사실 제가 언급하는 데이터는 기존의 DIKW 모델의 데이터는 아닙니다. 왜냐하면 기존의 DIKW 모델에서 데이터는 어떠한 연결도 없고 기본적으로 어떠한 의미도 없는 그냥 밑바닥에 있는 모래알 같은 존재입니다. 하지만 디지털 시대의 데이터는 조금 다릅니다. 보통 제가 예시를 들 때 저희 리스, 구글 스칼라 같은 곳에서 논문을 PDF로 다운받죠. 그 PDF는 데이터입니다. 맞죠? 근데 그 논문 PDF에 담겨져 있는 내용이 DIKW 모형에서도 데이터인가요? 아니죠. 최소한 인포메이션 혹은 놀리지 혹은 위스덤일 수도 있을 겁니다. 왜 이러한 격차가 발생하냐면 디지털에서의 데이터는 어디까지나 디지털에서 기계가 읽을 수 있는 모든 형태의 텍스트, 이미지, 영상을 의미하기 때문입니다. 그 안에 있는 퀄리티는 딱 따지지 않습니다. 실제 이런 의미에서 퀄리티를 따질 때에는 최소한 내용적이 아니고 형식적으로는 머신 리더블 데이터와 그리고 휴먼 리더블 데이터로 구분하는 것이 보다 합리적입니다. 예를 들어서 휴먼 리더블 데이터는 저희가 흔히 사용하는 PDF, DOC, HWP와 같은 파일입니다. 네, 이것도 충분히 유의미한 데이터죠. 하지만 예를 들어서 PDF에서 이순신을 검색하면 이순신이라는 결과물이 나올 겁니다. 하지만 충무공이라는 결과물은 나오지 않습니다. 너무 당연한 거라고요? 네. 하지만 우리가 웹사이트에서 이순신이라고 검색하면 충무공이 나오죠. 이 차이가 왜 발생하냐면 웹사이트에서는 최대한 이순신과 충무공이 동일 인물이다 라는 정보를 알려주었기 때문입니다. 그게 알고리즘적이든 혹은 데이터적이든. 그리고 데이터적으로 알려주기 위해서는 머신 리더블 데이터, 기계가 이해하기 좋은 데이터. 다시 말해서 이순신과 충무공은 같은 사람이야 라고 데이터로 알려주는 게 제일 좋겠죠. 그리고 우리 한국에서는 공공 데이터법이 매우 이른 시기에 만들어졌습니다. 2013년부터 이제 공공데이터법이 활성화되었는데요. 공공기관이 만든 모든 데이터는 결국 국민의 세금으로 만들어진 거기 때문에 국민에게 돌려주어야 된다라는 게 공공데이터법의 기본이었고요. 그리고 여기에는 저희 연구재단이나 제가 속해 있는 한국과학진흥사업단 여기에서 발주하는 토대 사업 있죠, DB 사업. 그 결과물도 기계가득형 데이터로 제출하게 되어 있습니다. 왜냐? 그 연구 프로젝트도 하나하나가 다 국민 세금으로 들어간 거기 때문이죠. 그래서 이런 다양한 데이터들의 예시 중에 하나가 이제 잘 만든 데이터라고 하는 게 국가서지 LOD라고 있습니다. 국립중앙도서관에서 운영하고 있는 최고 단계의 시멘틱 데이터 혹은 LOD, 링크드 오픈 데이터라고 부르는데요. 한국에 있는 모든 도서의 내용들 뿐만이 아니라 해외에 있는 자료들, 그리고 도서니까 도서 서지 정보 있죠. 저자, 출판사, 그리고 발행인, 그리고 내용, 기본적인 메타 키워드 이런 것들의 정보가 모두 종합되어 있습니다. 근데 사실 인문학자 입장에서는 아직 아쉽습니다. 여기서 정리된 거는 기본적으로 메타데이터라고 불리는 정보입니다. 쉽게 말해서 이 책의 내용 하나하나가 여기 안에 들어가 있지는 않습니다. 그러면 그게 무슨 말이냐? 예를 들어서 조선왕조실록이라고 하는, 여기 계신 한국인들은 다 아실 거고 해외에서도 아실지 모르겠는데, 조선왕조실록 웹사이트를 들어가 보시면 색깔칠이 이렇게 되어 있습니다. 인물이나 지명에. 근데 실제 로우 데이터셋을 보면은 인물 하나하나에 주민등록번호라고 불리는 아이디가 부여가 되어 있습니다. 그래서 동명이인, 동명에 대해서도 이 아이디를 통해서 인물 하나하나를 식별할 수 있게 되어 있습니다. 네. 이렇게 원래 안에 있는 컨텐츠 하나하나의 내용을 접근할 수 있으면 좋겠죠. 근데 여기에서 좀 좋은 사례이긴 한데요. 이 조선왕조실록과 저희 한국과중앙연구원에 있는 방목자료, 한국 역대인물 종합정보 시스템이라고 있습니다. 한국 역대인물들 다 모아놓은 건데 거기 있는 아이디를 서로 연계할 수 있습니다. 각각의 데이터들이 서로 다른 기관에서 서비스되고 있지만 연계가 가능한 겁니다. 그러면 이런 연계에서 어쩔 걸고? 각각 분리되어 있어도 각자 검색해보면 되는 거 아니야? 라고 생각할 수도 있겠지만 실제 이 데이터들이 온전히 상호 연계시킨다면 되게 어려운 질문들을 할 수 있습니다. 예를 들어서 간단하게 설명드리면 국사편찬위원회에 있는 실록 자료, 이 자료에는 어떤 인물이 어떤 관직에 있었다 라는 정보가 있습니다. 저희 한국중앙연구원에 있는 방목자료에는 어떤 사람이 옛날에 과거 시험이 있었죠. 그 과거 시험에 언제 합격을 했고, 그리고 이 과거 시험을 볼 때 이 사람의 아버지는 누구고, 형은 누구고, 뭐 이런 정보들이 있습니다. 뭐 여기뿐만 아니라 한국보정번역원 혹은 성균관대학교, 여기는 이제 사립기관이어서 살짝 배제가 되었는데 이 각각의 인물 정보들이 흩어져 있습니다. 만약에 지금 한국중앙연구원과 국사편찬위원회만 연결을 해도 어떤 질문이 가능하냐면 어떤 특정 관직에 제수된 사람의 아버지는 누구야? 라는 질문이 됩니다. 그게 뭐 어려워? 라고 생각하실지 모르겠지만 이걸 실제 연구를 하려면 국사편찬위원회에서 홍문관이라는 특정 관직에 있는 사람들을 다 찾고 그 찾은 사람들이 한국중앙연구원에서 다시 찾아가지고 그 찾은 인물들의 아버지는 누구인지 하나하나 다 찾고 있어야 됩니다. 대략 최소한 수백 명에 달하는 인물들에 대한 정보를 찾아야 되는 게 현실입니다. 쉽지 않죠. 하지만 만약 이 데이터가 시멘틱 데이터로 연결되어 있다면, 물론 제가 실제 실험을 했습니다. 실제 연결을 시켰는데 1초 만에 가능합니다. 5분 내로 끝내려고 하네요. 네. 근데 이 방금 보여드렸던 거는 제가 실험적으로 연구를 해가지고 아주 연구를 해서 1초 만에 이런 정보들을 찾아낼 수 있게 만든 베타 테스트지만 실제로는 상태가 좋지가 않습니다. 부편 담당자님께는 죄송한데요. 다들 아시는 분인데 예. 국사편찬위원회에서나 사실 저희 한주년도 똑같습니다. 각 기관마다, 부서마다, 프로젝트마다 데이터들이 서로 연계가 안 됩니다. 예를 들어서 한국인들이라면 다 알죠. 이완용이라는 분이 있죠. 친일파로 유명한데요. 외국노로 유명하고 이 이완용에 대해서 근현대 인물 자료라는 데이터셋이 있습니다. 여기에 있는 이완용과 그리고 근현대 이 이완용이 은행업도 하거든요. 근데 그 은행업에 있는 한성은행에 있는 근현대 회사조합 자료에 대주주로 올라와 있는 이완용은 서로 연관이 없습니다. 서로 그냥 다 떨어져 있습니다. 그래서 이 사람을 찾기 위해서는 하나하나 찾아야 됩니다. 또 그나마 이완용은 나은데요. 창씨개명이라는 걸 하죠. 그러면 같은 인물이 다른 이름으로 표시되는데 그런 거는 찾기가 매우 곤란해집니다. 설령 창씨개명한 인물을 알았어도 이 인물이 같은 인물인지 아닌지 주민등록번호 없이는 사실 확정하기가 어렵죠. 이렇게 서로 흩어져 있는 경우가 많습니다. 또한 한국의 데이터의 또 다른 문제점이 뭐냐면 유지보수가 되지 않습니다. 냉정하게 얘기했습니다. 수많은 프로젝트들의 결과물이 시간이 지나면서 개인의 노력으로 서버비를 충당하고 그게 어느 순간이 되면 온전히 유지되지 못하게 됩니다. 한국사 LOD라는 서비스였는데요. 지금은 사이트에 들어갈 수가 없습니다. 그래도 이거 상당히 많은 돈을 들여가지고 만들었던 건데 물론 저도 개인적으로 비판도 하고 칭찬도 하고 했던 서비스지만 이렇게 없어지는 건 아닐 것 같습니다. 네, 3분 내로 끝내라고 하시네요. 네, 그래서 최소한 아직까지 저도 생각을 온전히 정리하지 못했지만 지금까지들의 문제를 해결하기 위해서는 몇 가지 포인트들이 있을 것 같습니다. 첫째, 지금까지 인문학자들이 데이터를 편찬하는 행위에 대해서 온전한 가치를 부여하지 않았기 때문에 가치를 부여해야 될 것 같습니다. 이거는 전통적인 인문학 연구에서 똑같습니다. 저희가 영인본을 내거나 사전을 내거나 혹은 뭐 방금 칸트 나왔는데 칸트 전집을 번역하거나 네, 이런 거 되게 좋고 힘냈어 훌륭해 하지만 실제 평가를 할 때에는 온전한 점수를 주지 않죠. 데이터도 똑같다고 생각이 됩니다. 데이터를 만드는 일이 매우 어려움에도 불구하고 데이터 자체에는 큰 평가 요소를 주지 않습니다. 이제 뭐 해외 학술지나 국내외에서 데이터만으로 페이퍼를 내는 아티클을 내는 경우가 있지만 아직은 좀 한계가 있는 것 같고요. 또 다른 부분은 뭐 신뢰할 수 있는 지식 기반 구축이라고 표현을 했는데 머신 리더블 데이터를 온전히 만들게 되면 시멘틱 데이터를 현 시점에서는 가장 발달한 데이터로서 사용할 수밖에 없고 시멘틱 데이터를 사용하게 되면 자연스럽게 같은 대상에 대해서 서로 다른 관점들을 공유할 수 있습니다. 마지막이 제일 중요하다고 생각을 하는데요. 결국 유지가 돼야 됩니다. 어떤 거버넌스든 유지가 돼야 되고 유지하는데 현실적으로 돈이 없을래야 없을 수가 없습니다. 근데 다행인지 불행인지 한국은 국가 주도의 인문사회 연구가 매우 활성화되어 있고 그거밖에 없죠. 그렇게까지 얘기하면 안 되겠지만 그렇다면은 오히려 이거를 국가 주도의로서 자연스럽게 나타나는 나쁜 점들도 있지만 최소한 공공데이터법이 있는 이상 저희가 인문사회 연구를 하면서 만들어지는 데이터를 공공데이터법에 의존하여 혹은 의거하여 보호하고 좀 유지하고 발전시킬 수 있는 방안은 없을까? 뭐 클라우드를 공동으로 사용한다던가 뭐 이런 다양한 것들이 있겠죠. 이런 것들에 대해서 결국 저도 아직 아이디어 수준이고 좀 더 정리를 해야 되겠지만 우리 모두가 좀 같이 고민했으면 좋겠습니다. 네, 시간 정확히 맞췄죠? 네, 감사합니다.
시간을 정확히 잘 지켜주시면 감사합니다. We introduce four presenters. June,
Okay, until we wait for the presentation slide being prepared. Okay, so it's prepared. Hello everyone, my name is Jun Jung. I'm an assistant professor of sociology at KAIST, Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. First of all, thank you very much for having me here, and welcome everybody for this conference. And I think in my understanding, our topic today in this session is about AI and humanities research. And I think we all have been talking about how AI will somehow change our research projects in various ways, and what kind of further efforts have to be what kind of additional efforts do we need actually to do a new type of humanities in the age of AI? I think we have been discussed such kind of things. Today, I myself and my co-presenters, Professor Byung-Jun Kim from the Academy of Korean Studies and Professor Daewon No from Jeju National University, we are studying various perceptions of researchers about the use of AI. This is going to be a comparative project. So why do we have to care about AI and research activities in university? Actually, we think about research just as a taken for granted important thing that we always do in our university. However, surprisingly, research is an institutionalized practice that human beings have been doing only for several, maybe more than 100 years. Because modern form of university, based on the grant system and a patent system and a market system and a governmental policy, is the invention of 20th century, which has really short history. In such kind of institutional matrix, we do what we call research, and humanities scholars, social science scholar, engineers, and natural scientists, they all do their own way of doing research in such kind of system. And then the AI is coming in. So as a knowledge laborer who produce knowledge in such kind of institutionalized matrix, what kind of impacts are we going to get by this external shock? That's going to be a rising question that actually asks question not only just about who will be replaced or not, but actually it's about how the university system will change. And what's going to be the destination of researchers, knowledge laborers, inside of such system, and what's going to be inequality implication among researchers in such kind of system. That's going to be our question that we are trying to answer. So we are worrying about this AI particularly because, as we are observing every day, AI's ability has very high, extreme high affinity with knowledge labor. These days, if you use ChatGPT or whatever kinds of the AI models, it writes things and it reads things. I mean, of course, we have a question: what do you mean by reading? What do you mean by writing? But it looks like it reads and it writes. So many kind of tasks at glance. Here, AI has a very high degree of interference with knowledge labor, especially done by humanities and social science scholars. So our question is, what will be changes in knowledge labor system in university and knowledge laborers in such a system? And furthermore, the question is, particularly, here we have a comparative view, science, technology, engineering, medicine, and humanities and social science. How those STEM versus non-STEM, STEM versus humanities and social science, how these two field scholars imagine differently about the role of AI in their own future. And if there is any kind of differences between these two groups, what do you mean by that? That is our question. So this is based on 17 in-depth interview, which we will maybe further collect. So we try to make our sample as various as possible. So 8 from STEM fields, 9 from humanities and social science fields, mid-career scholar, young scholar, male, female. We tried several combinations. And we asked several common questions. So we first asked questions about what are your some personal experience of using AI in your research? And then furthermore, what kind of difficulties have you faced as a researcher, and such kind of problems does it have been resolved by AI? Or in what way AI has been helpful for you, or not? Or in your education, how do you use AI? How do you talk about AI to your students? Such kind of questions have been asked throughout those set of interviews. So after reading our interview script, we have analyzed that there are three major axes of analysis to think about differences in terms of how those researchers think differently about AIs. Here, three keywords are tool, knowledge, and future. So here, those keywords are not just separable, they're all interconnected. So for instance, perception about a tool has to do with what do they mean by knowledge when they say knowledge. And then that also includes the implication about, so what's going to be their future as well. So AI is a tool, and the meaning of knowledge, and then what's going to be the future of their field. Those three kinds of keywords will be analyzed. So first of all, AI and tools. So when we say AI is a good tool for the research, actually STEM researchers and humanities researchers actually mean different kind of things. The general pattern was that for STEM researchers, they perceived AI as a passive tool, which is perfectly tameable tool that they have to master and then use for the purpose of the maximization of the efficiency of their research. So AI as a tool is an objectified out there object that is perfectly objectified and tameable object that should be mastered by themselves. For humanities scholars, it's a little bit ambiguous tool. People say that they have used AI in their research. By the way, all of those scholars were recruited on the basis of the questionnaire, have you ever used AI for your research? So everybody have actually used AI for their research. Of course, some of them have been using AI very thoroughly, some of them not that much, but that is just a natural variance. But here the point is, everybody had used AI, but here humanities scholars showed a little more ambivalent point of view regarding, yeah, AI, we use it, but we're careful about it. So here we see STEM scholars' more clear position about the AI as an out there objectifiable object that they can tame. So interesting quote here is that, when I talk to student, hey, so here this is by STEM scholar, they write a graph and it doesn't look really good. Then they say, hey, you use GPT and reproduce the graph and learn from it, and I'll see you next time. So here they're using already GPT as an educational material and has no hesitancy at all in telling their students that you have to master this tool. In case of humanities scholar, well, I kind of consciously try to keep it from becoming more than just a tool. It's telling that they call it as a tool, but if it isn't really just perfectly a tool, there is no reason that they have to be careful about it. It's a tool, but very dangerous tool that can always go outside of the boundary of the meaning of the tool. So humanities scholars tend to show a little more ambivalent and little careful point of view about the AI as a tool. So here, the meaning of tool, the perception of the AI as a tool, here we see the difference. And the second axis is knowledge. When we say knowledge, when STEM researchers say that they produce knowledge by GPT, and when humanities scholars say they produce knowledge by GPT, they mean different things. Here, basically, STEM scholars widely share highly linear positivistic worldview regarding what we mean by knowledge. So for them, AI is helpful for productivity, and productivity is helpful for producing more knowledge, and more knowledge means that there will be patent, there will be paper, there will be more knowledge, there will be any way good for whatsoever, so that is a progress. So the AI-boosted productivity-based progress is a given assumption for the STEM scholars. However, for humanities scholars, more knowledge, like production of the more amount of knowledge itself, does not mean the progress for them anyway. Because the goal of humanity, here we'll see the POA, one interviewer said that, well, because it doesn't make money. In our field, I am the product, not what I create, but the act of thinking itself, the existence of myself. So someone say that in humanities, the product is humanist, not a humanistic papers. So here, productivity enhancement by the GPT is pointless for humanities and social science scholars because, for instance, in STEM fields, more amount of paper by the help of the AI will be likely to generate a lot of dump, but also a lot of good things as well. So out of that huge quantity of the papers and knowledge, some will be anyway helpful. So some people even said that mRNA vaccine development during the COVID-19, such kind of things were never possible without AI. So AI and more knowledge have been already creating more values and progress in the human society. So, which is good. But here, humanities scholars have fundamentally ambivalent view about more knowledge. Is that what we want? Maybe not. So their view on knowledge is here fundamentally different. That has to do with their future. STEM scholars very widely imagine the future that human is not an actor of knowledge maker anymore. So human being a just annotator and reader of the knowledge that AI produces just by themselves. So AI raises a question, AI writes an abstract, AI writes a paper, AI conducts an experiment, and AI writes a full manuscript, and AI evaluates it, and then AI publishes it, and human researchers just barely, slowly follow that book of knowledge that AI is just self-creating, is a one version of the imagination that STEM field researchers are thinking about. It means that more progress and more amount of knowledge by really well-working AI is doubtlessly that's a progress for STEM researchers. However, for humanities scholars, well, actually this was the most difficult part. Because most of humanities scholars just widely talk about, well, you know, humanities are already suffering and AI is coming and there will be more difficult future. And that's a kind of a common sense repertoire that actually sociologists do not really want to collect. But actually here, an interesting quote is that, well, but even if I suffer, I think I will just still do the humanities. Because despite the fact that it's really painful, that's what I like. That's what I do. So humanities will be there in the future as well. So here we see, I mean, I'm not judging which answer is better than the other, but here we see the difference of the point of view. So here the STEM field researchers have their strategic idea about how to utilize AI as a part of their research pipeline. And then even they're strategically imagining their own positionality in such kind of new pipeline. So in a pipeline of the knowledge production and consumption by the AI, they are already redefining the role of the human STEM researcher in terms of the interpretation and the repetition and the, such kind of role. But actually humanities scholars are still at a point that they feel very ambivalent about the role of the AI, and they feel kind of boundlessly semi-optimistic about their future. So here, different group of scholars have different understandings, perceptions about AI as a tool, and the meaning of the knowledge, and also their future projection. So what is this all about? So these whole things are going toward the conclusion about what's going to happen in academia. So there are several discussion points. So STEM fields, their views clarify the position of AI as a tool, and yet they engage deeply with, of course, voluntary strategies for taming it, and mastering it. Let us go back to the university system we have. The university system we have is different from university like 500 years ago. The university 500 years ago, 600 years ago, that was based on the patrons and some education for the novelty. But here, now the university is an institution where we have a triple, quadruple helix with industry, government, and many other commercial actors. And the productivity is the most important index in evaluating knowledge production in the university. In such already institutionalized system, AI, the field that has a higher AI affinity, such as science and engineering, obviously will occupy more resources within the academia, which is already shrinking. So, in terms of the resource inequality between STEM versus humanities and social science, that is a one obvious macro future consequence that we can probably imagine. And here we have a little more micro dynamic, which I've already mentioned. Here, of course, in terms of the macro scale, as I said, there is an inevitable, or already happening, or ongoing, the widening gap between STEM versus non-STEM inside of the campus. But at the same time, there's some kind of an everyday reproduction of the status quo is going on as well. By those STEM field researchers being more familiar with the AI, taming the AI, bringing AIs into their table, versus humanities and social science scholars just ostracizing themselves from the world of AI and criticizing the AI, of course, that is really important, but ostracizing themselves from the opportunities related to the AI and just being marginalized by themselves, self-penalizing in the context of AI. Might be the thing that's going to happen probably as a micro everyday mechanism in the university. So that's what I prepared, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. And now we can go to the discussion. Before that, I introduce our discussion. Meng Sun-hyun, Professor of Daejeon University.
I'd like to start with my introduction. My name is Sung-hyun Meng. I'm a vice president for Daejeon University. I'm in charge of a grad school of AA Convergence School. And I used to work in KAIST with him. And I was a computer scientist though, but I did have a lot of interest in humanities and social sciences. So I ended up creating a center for humanities and social sciences at KAIST, and I worked with him at the time. Before that, I was head of web science. Tony Bill was a United professor at that time for many years, and then we haven't talked to each other for a while, but I'm very glad to meet him here. And Professor Kim Babo also, I met him in his institute. So anyway, it's very familiar environment for me. But the topic that I heard today and the topic that I read, from the very beginning, from the early papers, is very broad. And I woke up 4:30 this morning to come down to this place. It's a long way, so I'm a little bit hazy, but I try my best to make it very interesting. Okay, so there's a variety of topics. The session itself is too broad in a sense, but I guess the point is that we like to see the intersection between humanities and social sciences and AI. And of course, there are lots of concerns and maybe hopes with AI in every field. But I think, as the Professor Jun mentioned, there is a great anxiety on the side of scholars in humanities, especially, as well as social sciences. So what I like to do is I like to kind of make a comment and maybe raise a question for individual speakers here. And then maybe I'd like to listen to your responses to them. And they're very bright topics, but maybe in the end we will see how they relate to each other by listening to their responses. Okay? So that's what I try. And frankly, I had to read short papers on the way to come to this place. So I had to kind of write down something. Okay, so maybe I start from Professor Jeonju because he gave the last, talk. And I know he has been trying to sort of compare and contrast between humanities, social science like HSS and STEM area. And I agree with most of the points. But when you talk about the fact that the thinking process itself is very important for humanities people, I agree. But on the other hand, that doesn't apply to humanities people. So that also applies to social science people as well as natural science or engineers as well. So we also, as a computer scientist, we also transform by actually making reference to what AI can offer us, right? So I think that's the same probably, although we have different degrees. So maybe what you're saying is that you're trying to reflect what the humanity people or scholars are feeling, okay? So maybe they're kind of defending themselves by saying that, well, the result of knowledge we're getting from AI is not so important. I guess the process is important, but if you rely too much on AI, then we are not having enough opportunity to go through the thinking process. So I was kind of wondering whether there's a little bit of kind of defense of a lot of scholars. So that's one question. And the other question is, your insights are based on qualitative analysis. I don't know how many people you spoke to for this study. So they actually bring us a lot of good ideas, but I'm not sure how representative they are. So you probably have generated a lot of hypotheses, but we still need to do a lot of work on trying to prove or disprove your hypothesis. So maybe I'd like to hear that, what do you see you're going at this point in order to sort of, add some maybe quantitative analysis of your qualitative work.
May I answer the question
sure.
right away? Okay. So thank you very much for Professor Sung-Hyun Meng. I still remember the time when we wrote a grant proposal together, which eventually didn't work well, but it was a really wonderful memory, and I'm very honored to have you here as a discussant for my paper. And thank you for your insightful questions, and I really like your first question because you said that maybe here at the interview quotes that I hear from many of humanities scholars, those kind of things are not the factual discourse, but actually a self-defense. Saying like, AI, well, that's not that important. Or AI, yeah, I use it, but I use it really cautiously. Those all kind of things are kind of self-defense. So I actually take those kind of quotes not as a factual manifestation of what they're really thinking, but actually an evidence of self-defense. And I think they themselves showing the self-defense in front of me would probably resemble what do they actually do in everyday life and in front of their even colleagues as well. Which means that every day they will probably ostracize themselves from the opportunity of learning about AI or bringing AI as a tool for their own research. Just like they showed such kind of reaction in front of me. So I think you're perfectly correct in interpreting those kind of quotes as a self-defense mechanism. And second thing is about the scaling up. So always, all researchers have some division of labor, and also research projects have a life cycle. So this is a qualitative start part of the research. As a sociologist, of course, I think a qualitative part, as it is, deserves to be published as a research, but I think I have a bigger ambition regarding how can I scale this up into the computational studies. But here, a little bit ambiguous thing is that I can for sure try to study some NLP based on the Reddit posting about how researchers think about the AI, but that is also still self-selected sample, which does not have a population size representation. So I'm still thinking about ways, but I think that is really insight way to elevate what I am learning from this project. So computational scale up, I will definitely do. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll go to Tony. I didn't hear the first part of the story because I was late. I had to rely on the shuttle bus. Anyway, but I do understand a little bit about what he had been doing a long time ago, and based on the second part of his talk that I heard, he has been very interested in kind of delicacy of language, like sarcasm and things like that. And I had myself had the experience of trying to kind of recognize sarcasm in long text using a very early version of the neural network type of AI. And we had a little bit of success in kind of recognizing which text includes the sarcasm versus just very direct, positive or negative sentiment in text. So it is very, very, I think, especially in this era, we are trying to make a distinction between human beings and AI, and trying to kind of recognize which part of human capabilities are kind of hard to find in the AI area. So I think from that point of view, I think it's very, very interesting work. I saw some graphs, and you're saying you're trying to sort of convince us that your own kind of quantitative way of showing how current language model kind of lacks, that sort of thing. My question is this: so AI is progressing, almost every day. Professor Kimball talked about hallucination. Hallucination is now even almost like an old problem because people have been talking about old solutions. So as you see how fast AI is progressing, do you think the analysis that you saw today using LLM is going to be the same maybe 2 years down the road? What do you think?
I'm quite positive about the capabilities of AI. I think it's easy to become, thank you, it's easy to become complacent about these systems. I was looking at the parallel translation here, which is very impressive. It made a couple of small mistakes. At one stage it described Christ as Christ universally, but then shortly afterwards it corrected itself. And I noticed that when you said you were feeling a little hazy, it said, I'm feeling a little lazy, which I suppose is a misrepresentation of what you said. But when you look at this, I was really surprised to see that it is cleaning up our text as we speak. I've recently been processing Zoom transcripts from qualitative interviews I've had to do for a project. And I was stunned by how illiterate we are when we use Zoom. That the text that is the transcript of what we say is so full of interlocutions and interruptions and broken self-corrections and half-completed sentences. Whereas when I look at this text here, every sentence is perfect. It makes it sound so fluent and so self-possessed. it's like we're reading from a prepared script. It's really editing out all of the stuff that we find in more primitive systems like C. So not only is it doing a very useful task, this parallel translation, it's actually improving us as we speak. It's presenting a better version of us, even in a sense, the best version of us. So I'm very positive about what these things can do, and I'm very impressed by this. And the reason I say this is that I've worked in AI for a long time, and for many, many years, teaching students about AI, you're essentially promising the future to students, saying, one day this will work, one day this will be better, understand this now, and one day we will have the data and the algorithms to do things properly. Now when I teach students AI, it's already here, and I don't have to make any promises to them. So you're quite right that in 2 years' time, the state of the art will be so much better than it is now, and it will continue to surprise me. I wake up every day and I'm surprised by what machines can do, whereas my students are completely complacent. They don't see this as cool technology, they don't see this as surprising, miraculous technology, they just see it as, this is what the world is giving me today. Now, are there areas of human behavior that the machines cannot quite capture properly yet? Absolutely. Irony is a little bit a tricky phenomenon because humans are very poor with irony. If you watch people on social media try to use irony, they cannot agree on what they mean by the term irony, and they cannot agree on their interpretation of what it is they're doing. If you look at how people behave in large groups, they behave very incoherently and irrationally. Recently in the United States, there was a chat show host, Jimmy Kimmel, who was temporarily suspended for saying something in his monologue that he didn't actually say. Millions of people were very upset about him saying something that he did not say. I was watching the TV going, where did he say this? He didn't say it. So I think in many respects the machines are an improvement on us if we use them in a positive sense, if we use them to actively complement our weaknesses and to enhance our strengths. I don't know whether we will do that. I think that we are lazy, sometimes malevolent, sometimes very cynical. My particular area at the moment is humor, and machines are very poor at humor. And I take great comfort from that, because it means that there is something left to research. And I'm excited to still pursue that. And I think in a couple of years we will have cracked that problem. But for now, irony and humor are issues that are not of great commercial intent or importance, but they are at the leading edge of what makes us human, I think. And I think that there's lots of work at the interface between the humanities and AI research for us to work on together.
Well, I agree with you, especially for the humor aspect. I try to use the ChatGPT in order to sort of kind of attract it to come up with more humorous comments and so forth, but it actually miserably failed. So I agree with you. And I forgot to mention this one. I was very happy to see your work because you're kind of bridging the gap between kind of old-style symbolic text mining type of work with the sort of current contemporary AI work. So the reason why I say this is because sometimes I get a question from people, especially from AI researchers, like students or ex-students. I said, what should we be doing in 5 years down the road, especially in the AI area? So how AI is going to sort of develop? And my view is that we worked on sort of symbolic AI quite a while, and then we kind of moved to neural type of AI. And I've been thinking that there's a big gap between sort of sort of neuron-related activities in our brain and also our cognitive activities. So from that point on, we need to, go back to some, sorry, the neurosomatic type of work. I emphasize a lot on that, but people were very crazy about neural network type of work for the past few years, not paying attention at all to a symbolic aspect. But now I think people begin to see and how they can, combine, probably because of the lack of transparency of neural network type of work. So I was very glad to see you anyway.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the importance of bridging symbolic and neural statistical approaches.
Okay, sorry about this voice. Let me just go back to Professor Kimbaro. I really appreciate your presentation about your effort and your sort of previous people at your institute trying to come up with a lot of semantic data. The work is still very important, I think, even more important than before, probably because of the rise of Palantir, the company. They're trying to sort of combine ontology with the AI, and they've been extremely successful and very unique in their business. So, by sort of kind of observing how they have been kind of progressing toward the current status, I thought that the old LOD work and semantic network work would probably, be very, very crucial for maybe more humanistic way, more sort of, I don't know how to say, but kind of better way to use AI for business, I guess. So I wonder how you see our Korean effort to build LOD and semantic I don't know, it's not network, but semantic, data set would be helpful, not only in academia, but also in industry. And what do you see as your role as kind of deploying that kind of contents, as well as related, technology for Korean industry? And maybe that's a kind of way of, sort of creating a new role of a humanities area. I think the translation is very accurate.
아까 전에 뉴럴 네트워크는 조금 이상하게 저는 끝끝이 한국말로 하겠습니다. 네, 저한테 어떻게 답변을 해야 될지 쉬운 답변은 아닌데요. 제 입장에서는 사실 비즈니스는 차선으로 생각하고는 있습니다. 궁극적으로 비즈니스적으로 유효하면 참 좋을 것 같긴 한데 근본적으로 지금 딥러닝에서 학습 데이터 관련된 문제들이 다양하게 있지 않습니까? 그런 문제에서 결국 문제는 얘네들이 학습한 얘네들의 대답 중에서 이 대답에서 차지하고 있는 학습 데이터 혹은 특정 학습 데이터의 분량은 혹은 기여는 어느 정도이냐를 유추할 수 있어야 되는데, 예를 들어서 이거는 마치 제가 지금 40여 년을 살아오면서 지금까지 학습한 것 중에 어떤 것이 제가 지금 이 순간 바라하고 있는데 얼마만큼 기여를 했냐라는 질문과 크게 다르지는 않다고 생각을 합니다. 그런 의미에서 아직은 이런 학습 소스나 혹은 참조 소스에 대한 기여도를 명확하게 측정하기 전에는 사실 데이터 작업이 유의미한 비즈니스 모델로서 작동하기는 조금 어렵지 않나 라는 생각을 하고 있고요. 다만 원래 인문사회학자들이 그렇게 돈만을 생각하고 살면은 하지 말았어야죠. 인문사회 그것보다는 오히려 저는 이제 한국학중앙연구원이라는 공적 기관에 있는 입장에서 인문사회학자들이 조금 편안한 방식으로 어떻게 하면 데이터를 만들고 그 만드는 것을 공유할 수 있을까를 조금 더 고민하고 있고, 그거에 대해서는 저 같은 경우는 플랫폼을 만드는 거를 하려고 노력하고 있습니다. 이제 데브옵스 단위에서는 클라우드 인문사회 쪽 연구자들에게 프로젝트 했을 때 제일 어려운 게 사실 서버거든요. 인문사회 프로젝트, 대부분의 프로젝트가 사실 트래픽 얼마 발생도 안 하는데 3천만 원, 4천만 원짜리 서버를 만들어내야 되고, 그리고 프로젝트 끝나고 유지 보수도 사비로 해야 되고, 이게 문제라고 생각하고, 또 다른 측면에서 더 쉽게 가가지고 예를 들어서 근대나 구술 자료 같은 거 있지 않습니까? 요즘 STT가 있기 때문에 다 비용을 청구합니다. 근데 왜요? 차라리 저희 연구자를 위한 무료 플랫폼이 있고, 그 무료 플랫폼에 음성을 올리면 자동적으로 STT로 텍스트로 전사되고, 텍스트 안에서 인물이나 장소나 용어들이 자동으로 식별이 되고, 그 다음에 또 저희가 검수를 받아야 하잖아요. 인터뷰어나 인터뷰어한테. 그러면 그 검수 받은 거를 여기까지는 공개할게요, 여기까지 안 할게요를 온라인에서 하고, 그 다음에 퍼블릭 할 건 퍼블릭하고, 안 할 건 안 하고. 그러니까 이 정도의 온라인 시스템이 있으면 얼마나 좋을까? 플랫폼이 있으면 좋을까? 인문사회의 많은 부분에서 구술하잖아요. 네. 그런 부분들에 대해서 어떻게 마련할까를 조금 더 고민하고 있고, 돈이 드는 것도 고민을 해야 되는데 제가 재주가 없어서 거기까지는 아직입니다.
Thank you. I'm not talking about sort of trying to change the humanities to make money, but no,
네.
that's not my intention. But I have begun to see the value of humanities more and more for businesses and industries, especially with AI. So in one of the conferences with metadata, I was the keynote speaker, and I was trying to make myself useful for them. And what I came up at that time was that why don't you try to use metadata or ontology technology or approaches to help AI practitioners who have been using lots of contents relentlessly, trying to sort of help AI performance, right? And there are lots of problems, like ethical problems and so forth, so with the training data set. So I thought that maybe using the ontology idea or metadata idea, you can try to kind of organize the training data set in such a way that people or AI people would have kind of control over what to use, what not to use for the training data set. So I think that's one example of how we can make use of our knowledge about something kind of in between industry and the pure humanity type of work. I mean, it's not really pure humanity, but you've been doing a lot of project work. So those project results could be used in a number of different ways. I'm not saying that your goal is trying to make money and work on a project, but you work on a project for your own sake, maybe for humanity researchers, but the end product could be very, very useful. So if you kind of change your viewpoint a little bit, then your work could be very, very useful for other people. That's what I was trying to get at. Okay. So,
as I mentioned, the mental element is very important because the crime may be committed willingness or unwillingness. Depending on legal systems, unwillingness behaviors sometimes would be not a crime. So only intentional behaviors may be treated as a crime. For instance, in Poland, the crime of thieving something is strictly intentional. So if I by misleading if I think too much and I go to another person, for instance Porsche, so very expensive car, I don't committing a crime because I have no intention to unlawfully possessing that Porsche. So it is extremely important that individual must be firstly able to recognize and control its behavior. And AI nowadays it isn't. And secondly, have particular attitude toward that behavior.
Right.
And AI, to simplify, AI don't think at all. It generates only a text or another content.
So you're trying to kind of be very easy with AI and AI's role, but what would you say? There is a deepfake type of AI, and somebody was badly hurt by the deepfake. The AI did not have any intention, right? But the creator had a bad intention, and then if that's the case, then who would you blame?
Who committing a crime? The author, the person who used deepfake to generate counterfactual content. So the AI is merely a tool in the human's hands. And if we may find that human factor, and nowadays in all of cases we can find it, so we must convict that person who used unlawfully that AI tools.
So you're just blaming the creator or the person who used the technology to create the deepfake type of video, right?
Right, but the blame is not the guilt is not the only element which must be established to must be convicted.
So
sometimes maybe perpetrator insane, so he won't be subject of criminal liability because in Poland he does not committing crime at all because he doesn't say very simply, doesn't know what he or she do. So I know it's maybe a little bit complicated, but generally, as in that sense, as you probably understand the blame, yes, the creator only.
But what happened to the platform itself? The platform provided the capability of making such.
But the platform does not create criminal effect.
But
so we may. I know what about what you are talking, because they are in the criminal such theories of effects that establish that sufficient to ascertain a crime is that the quantity of all conditions necessary to committing a crime. So, in taking that conception, we may convict not only platform operator, but for instance, parents of creator, because it was necessary to committing the crime that the creator must be born, right? So the parents create it. So I don't think so that ChatGPT can be the provider of ChatGPT, for instance, or other tools may be blamed for that, because that tool offers a multitude of possibilities, also positive.
Yeah, I think using the current technology is pretty easy to sort of discern who is going to be responsible for the wrongdoings. Okay, but as we all know, AI is developing very fast, and then more and more the AI scientists, engineers trying to make AI more and more autonomous. So it's trying to give more and more autonomy to the machine or to AI. Like agent technology. You don't have to say much, but the agent is going to do everything for me, right? So what I have to say is that, you know, I want to eat, you know, apple in an hour. Okay, so that's my order to the AI, and AI is very autonomous, and the AI tries sort of trying to maximize how AI can help, you know, the owner of AI or the master, okay, assuming that AI is kind of slave, right? Or AI has been designed to kind of optimize its own goal. The goal could be very, very broad, right? So in the process of satisfying the goal, AI has a lot of freedom. Of course, you know, the AI companies are trying to be very careful in such a way that they don't do anything unethical, but there always possibility there could be some holes, right? So, you know, the designers of AI not just have to think about every aspect of you know, human behaviors and events, everything, right? So if that comes, maybe in a year, then you know, what I'm saying is that AI is becoming very autonomous. It's being given, you know, very broad goal, and AI has its own autonomy to pursue the goal and to get the result back. So then, who is going to be responsible for maybe some kind of criminal act in that process?
So, the blame, the guilt in Polish criminal law is defined, for instance, as possibility of control its behavior and recognize its ontological and axiological value. So, AI, of course, may have a lot of autonomy, but the question is, and the point is, whether AI can tell, no, I do not generate that video because it is a crime, because it is immoral, it is a control on my beliefs, right? Probably no. So the AI is still a tool. The AI may only, in my opinion, may optimize its task, and as I understand you properly, the AI has freedom to choose in the scope of optimization, so to reach the planned goal in the best and more effective manner. So it is not a possibility of recognition of axiological sense of its act.
But in such a situation, the original intention, human intention was good. So the master is not responsible for wrongdoings. What I said to AI is that I want to eat apple. That's it.
So the other important issue is that you have to try. I want to eat apple. Because without that, AI does not launch, right? And that issue, another one, which is called error. So, which may be some mistakes. And the question is, what is a guilt? But I think that nowadays the AI cannot, it's our own, decide that he do something wrong. It will probably be error, as I mentioned about autonomous vehicle. The systems failed, and the car doesn't brake before pedestrian crossing and hit the pedestrian, right? But it was error. It was not intention of the car to cause an accident, right?
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't expect that I would get the correct or any answers from you, but I just tried to kind of raise the controversial issues that a lot of lawyers are thinking about these days. Nothing has been resolved completely, right? So from that point of view, I like to suggest that what sort of roles that the humanities scholars can play in this kind of situation. A lot of things are ambiguous, very controversial, but the humanity people have a belief in humans, right? So what are the roles that we play as a humanity scholars? I mean, when I created the Center for Humanities and Social Sciences, I had a very, very different goal than maybe a lot of humanity people would have at the time. That wasn't the Center for Research. So I wanted to just make sure that humanity people, they are very smart. There are many, many smart people, and they have their own majors like history, philosophy, and so forth. But especially in Korea, almost no one could sort of consistently engage in some kind of jobs related to history or philosophy and so forth. So I just wanted to make sure that those people, in those areas would have capability of continuously working and enjoying in what they studied in universities. So, from that point of view, here we are. This session is about AI and research or humanity research, but I'm not sure research is sort of just in ivory tower, but it has to just go out and then make an impact on the humanity areas. So from that point of view, problems like his, what kind of contribution that we can make as a humanity researcher? I mean, I'm not, but you guys. So you have any comments?
Thank you for the comments and thank you for your sincere response. We still have more than 15 minutes. So how about to move to the floor because there are so many people here. Okay. Maybe I bring you mic.
한국말을.
괜찮습니다.
예, 저는 역사 전공자인 김기봉입니다. 제가 최근에 읽은 책 중에 이산 몰릭의 듀얼 브레인 책을 참 재밌게 읽었습니다. 원래 영어 제목은 코 인텔리겐스라고요. 거기서 이제 AI는 얼라이언 인텔리겐스다, 외계 지능이다 라는 거죠. 우리하고 다른 지능이죠. 도구가 아니라 지능이라는 거죠. 다른 방식으로 생각인지 계산인지 문제를 해결할 수 있는 능력을 가진 존재라는 거죠. 그것과 관계 맺는 4개의 원칙을 얘기를 했어요. 언제나 가까이 둬라. 그리고 인간이 개입해라. 그 다음에 내가 누구인지를 알려줘라. 페르소나를 주라는 거죠. 거기에 맞춤 대답을 하도록. 그리고 지금이 최악의 AI다. 앞으로 더 좋은 게 나온다. 이제 이 개를 염두에 두고 이 두 개의 관계, 인간과 AI의 관계의 두 유형을 얘기를 하더라고요. 하나는 켄타우로스, 그러니까 반은 인간이고 반은 기계. 그러니까 인간과 말처럼 이 두 개의 협업을 할 것이냐, 아니면 사이보그가 될 것이냐, 완전히 융합되는 거죠. 이 두 개의 기로에 서 있다. 이게 지금 우리 운명이라고 생각해요. 근데 문제는 뭐냐면 어차피 인간과 기계는 공진화하는 문명의 포스트 휴먼 문명으로 간다고 생각을 해요. 이렇게 됐을 때 저는 인문학자인데요. 휴머니티스가 뭘까? 그러니까 이제는 우리가 포스트 휴머니티스를 해야 되는 게 아닌가. 그러니까 두 개의 서로 다른 지능이 만났을 때 켄타우로스의 협업을 할 거냐, 아니면 융합하는 사이보그가 될 거냐. 이건 시간 문제일 것 같거든요. 그 선택은 지금 우리 앞에 있는 것 같아요. 여기서 인문학자들이 휴머니티스가 아니라 이제는 포스트 휴머니티스 될 수밖에 없는 문명의 패러다임이 바뀌었다고 생각하거든요. 여기에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지를 알고 싶습니다. 아마 여기 각자가 다 대답을 하실 수 있을 것 같은데 사회 보시는 아마 교수님이 제일 많이 하실 거고 마지막 발표자 전준 교수님이신가요? 아마 분명히 입장이 있으실 것 같고 김바로 교수님은 인문학자니까 좀 알려주시면 고맙겠습니다. 이상입니다.
시작을 한 분 정도만 하고 다른 질문
네, 저기 한국말을 하셨으니까 제가 한국말로 대답을 잠깐 해드리면, 물론 저는 인문학자는 아닌데 제가 얼마 전에 그 AGI 시대와 인간의 미래라는 책을 쓴 게 있는데 이스탄불 책하고 거의 비슷한 시기에 나온 것 같아요. 그래서 그 사람 책도 제가 좀 봤고 그런데 그 뷰포인트가 굉장히 비슷하긴 합니다. 근데 이제 그 지금 질문하신 것에 대해서는 저는 그 사이보그가 된다는 것도 그렇고 사이보그가 된다는 것 자체는 사실 그 AI만 갖고는 안 되는 것 같고 그 외에 뭐 생물학도 그렇고 많은 부분이 발전이 되는 거기 때문에 그건 좀 시간이 좀 많이 걸릴 거라고 생각하고 있고요. 그래서 오히려 협업을 하는 게 저는 그렇다고 생각하고 공진화 얘기하셨는데 공존하고 공진화가 이제 이게 진전이 돼야 되는데 사실 그 정도 생각을 하시는 분이 별로 많지가 않습니다. 제가 강연을 많이 다니고 있는데 그런 분들이 거의 없어요. AI를 도구로 사용해서 어떻게 잘 쓸까에 되게 머무르고 있고요. 그래서 선생님이 말씀하신 것처럼 저도 좀 생각이 이제는 그러니까 인간의 정체성이 어딘가부터 따져봐야 될 것 같거든요. 왜냐하면 이제 그 정신노동이 자동화되니까 사실 사람이 이제 더 이상 일을 할 곳이 많지가 않단 말이죠. 지금 뭐 우리 해고사태 박사하시겠지만 그래서 그런 시대에 그러면 인간은 뭐를 해야 되는가를 좀 알아야 되는데 저도 이제 이공학자지만 사실 이공학한 사람을 얘기해보면 별로 관심이 없어요. 생각도 없고 미래에도 생각이 없고 그냥 나는 단지 지금 이 기술 개발을 하면 좋겠고 거기에 나는 굉장히 열정이 있고 거기에 나는 모든 시간을 쏟겠다 이 정도지 거기서 5년, 10년에 어떤 세상이 올까라는 생각이 별로 없습니다. 제가 아무리 강조를 해도 안 돼요. 그래서 그거는 이제 한계거든요. 그러니까 인문학 쪽에서 그런 답안을 좀 제시를 하셔야 될 것 같아요. 저는 꼭 그러길 좀 원하고 있습니다.
그 시간이 없다고 말씀하셨지만 사회학자가 또 여기서 쿼터를 채우지 않으면 또 인문사회 이야기로 들어가야 되기 때문에 저도 짧게 말씀을 드려보겠습니다. 네. 이런 메커니컬한 밸런스를 추구하는 저는 사실은 그 포스트 휴먼 담론에 대해서 생각을 했을 때 우리가 언제 순수한 휴먼이었던 적이 있는가? 사실은 그런 적이 없죠. 그러니까 포스트 휴먼이 다가온다고 하지만 우리는 포스트 휴먼으로 이미 수천 년을 살아왔습니다. 무슨 뜻이냐면은 인간은 원래 인간이 통제할 수 없는 무언가를 만들고 자신이 만든 그 무엇에 의해 자신이 다시 만들어지는 방식의 공진화를 문명 내내 해왔고 우리는 그걸 새삼스럽게 지금 포스트 휴먼이 오고 있다고 새로운 것처럼 이야기하고 있죠. 근데 하지만 잘 생각해보면 민주주의도 그렇고 자본주의도 그렇고 모든 정치 이데올로기와 경제 시스템이 인간이 만든 것이지만 인간이 계획한 대로 인간에게 영향을 주은 것만은 아니었죠. 그런데 이러한 식으로 그 인간과 공진화하는 체계로서의 어떤 과학기술이라고 하는 것은 사실 우리가 민주주의나 자본주의에 대해 생각하는 것에 비해서 과학기술이라고 하는 것이 우리의 삶을 공진화시키는 그 내생이자 동시에 외생인 변수인 것으로 생각하는데 익숙하지가 않습니다. 제 생각에 그 인문학자 그리고 사회과학자의 지금의 역할은 그 인간이 만들고 동시에 인간을 만드는 어떤 하나의 객체로서 기존의 그 사회 시스템들을 넘어선 인공물, 인공지능 가령 그런 것에 대해서 좀 더 적극적으로 끌어안고 인문학자들도 바로 그런 인공지능을 만드는 사람 중에 하나로서 그리고 함께 공진화해갈 동등한 어떤 객체로서 인공지능을 바라보는 법을 인문학자들이 익히는 것 그게 지금 우리에게 주어진 가장 그 어렵고 빨리 해야 될 과제라고 생각합니다.
제가 10초만 쓰겠습니다. 딱 10초. 네. 뭐 보셨을 것 같은데 제가 굉장히 이제 읽고 나서 감명을 받은 책이 이런 컨텍스트에서 그 뭐였냐면은 서울대학교 그 철학과의 김기형 교수님이라고 있어요. 김기현. 네. 그래서 그 책이 이제 인간다움이라는 제목의 책인데 거기서 보면 이제 역사를 쭉 훑어갖고서 이제 인간다움의 요소가 뭐냐는 거 얘기를 하는데 거기서 끝나는 건 아니고 뒤에 AI가 좀 나옵니다. 근데 AI 파트보다도 그 세 가지 이제 감정, 이성, 자유, 그 세 가지 키워드를 갖고 이제 모든 걸 얘기를 했는데, 그거를 생각하다 보면 이제 저희가 뭘 해야 될까가 좀 답이 좀 나오더라고요. 그래서 혹시 안 보신 분이 있으면 한번 보시면 좋겠습니다.
네, 추가적으로 코멘트나 질문 있으신 분 편하게 손 들으시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
예, 제가 그냥 큰 목소리로 말씀드릴게요.
알겠습니다.
굉장히 어려운 문제에 우리가 부딪히고 있는데 우리 모두 상기해야 할 것이 저는 한 가지 있다고 봅니다. 휴머니티를 어떻게 규정할 것인가, 어떻게 이해할 것인가 하는 문제에 있어서 꼭 우리가 유념해야 할 것이 인간이 이런 생체를 갖고 살기 시작한 것이 약 15만 년 전부터라고 합니다. 근데 이 AI가 등장한 것은 반세기도 안 됐습니다. 그리고 최근의 이 발달은 그야말로 속도가 빠릅니다. 이 빠른 속도가 15만 년이나 걸려서 이루어진 우리의 생체를 토대로 할 수밖에 없는 인간의 삶에 큰 위험이 되지 않을까, 이런 걱정을 심각하게 해야 된다고 보고, 그야말로 이거는 정치적인 정책적인 차원에서 공동의 대처를 해야 된다, 이런 생각을 합니다. 유념해 주시기 바랍니다.
아니, 제가 선생님 말씀하신 게 이제 그 유발 하라리가 주로 얘기하는 그런 이제 주제 중에 하나인데요. 저도 저 책에 썼습니다만 지금 이제 그 15만 년 말씀하시니까, 그러니까 저는 이제 그 인공지능을 연구한 사람이니까 지능에 모든 초점을 두고 있었거든요. 근데 지능에 초점을 두면은 답이 잘 안 나옵니다. 인공지능이 계속 그렇게 발전하기 때문에 이미 그 멘사 노르웨이 IQ 테스트 148이 나오거든요. IQ가 148입니다. 그리고 전 세계 인구 0.1%밖에 안 돼요. 그게. 그 정도로 좀 지능이라는 게 있다는데, 그러면 인간이 계속 물러나기만 할 거냐인데, 거기 답이 저는 뭐라고 생각하냐면 바로 그건 몸이 있다는 거고, 몸이 있기 때문에 인간은 감정하고 느낌을 가지고 있었다는 거거든요. 그래서 그 세계적인 그 의식 분야에 유명한 사람이 이제 안토니오 다마지오라는 분이 있는데, 그분이 의식, 뭐 자아의식 이런 쪽에는 세계 최고의 권위자인데, 그분이 쓴 책이 몇 권이 있어요. 한국에도 나와 있고. 근데 거기서 명확하게 얘기하는 건 뭐냐면은 느낌이라는 게 뭐라든지 잘 알자는 거거든요. 저는 봤더니 AI가 지금 인공지능이 로봇하고 합체가 돼서 느낌을 가지게 되기 전까지는 그거는 인간 고유의 영역입니다. 느낌으로 시작하는, 감정으로 시작하는, 느낌이 있어야 저희가 목표도 생기고 호기심도 생기고 다 생기는 거거든요. 협력도 하고 싶고 다 그렇잖아요. 그래서 그 느낌에 초점을 두고서 저희가 나가야 될 것 같은데, 그거를 이공 쪽에서는 별로 관심도 없고, 그러니까 이제 인문사회 쪽에서 그런 부분을 잘 정리를 해갖고 우리 사회를 좀 바꿔나가는 게 필요한데, 국가적으로 뭐 아니면 전 세계적으로 무슨 뭐 정책을 정하고 하면 좋은데요. 지금 보시면 알겠지만 지금 유엔이 지금 제 역할을 못 하잖아요. 앞으로 그런 기관이 만들어져서 AI를 어떻게 해보자. 저는 굉장히 힘들 거라고 봅니다. 방향이 맞긴 맞는데 힘들 거라는 거고. 그래서 저는 그래서 진짜 그 인문 쪽에 계신 분들이 뭐 사회운동 하셔도 좋고, 그래서 사람이 좀 바뀌어야 된다고 생각해요. 저는 사람이 AI를 이해를 하고, 그럼 우리가 더 잘할 수 있는 게 뭐고, 그럼 우리 그쪽으로 교육도 하자, 이렇게 돼야 되는 건데, 지금 AI가 너무너무 잘하고 있는 것만 이제 교육시키고 있거든요. 뭐 논리적인 거, 수학적인 이런 것만 하고 있잖아요. 이제는 AI가 봤을 때는 되게 우스운 거예요. 아, 인간들아, 그건 내가 이렇게 잘하는데 아직도 거기만 목매고 있냐, 이렇게 얘기할 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 부분을 저희가 좀 생각해야 될 것 같습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 네. 마지막으로 이제 한 질문 받고 저희가 질문을 한번 할 수 있도록 하겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 명지대학교에서 인문사학과 연구원으로 있는 최분금이라고 합니다. 오늘 이렇게 AI와 인문학 연구에 함께 이렇게 참석하게 되어 영광으로 생각합니다. 저는 두 번째로 발표하신 마르친 갈린스키 교수님께 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 갈린스키 교수님의 오늘 발표는 AI 처벌의 정당성을 칸트의 정언명령에서 찾는 시도로 보입니다. 하지만 정언명령은 행위자가 스스로 규범을 세우고, 그리고 또 그 규범을 자신에게 되돌릴 수 있어야 한다는 전제를 가집니다. 그렇다면 여기서 질문 드리겠습니다. AI가 자기 입법적 주체가 아니라면 정언명령은 AI 처벌의 철학적 근거가 있을지요? 결국 논의의 초점은 AI를 처벌할 수 있는가 보다 AI에게 어떻게 책임을 기소할 것인가로 옮겨가야 하지 않을까 생각합니다. 오늘 발표는 AI 처벌의 정당성을 칸트의 정언명령에 찾는 시도로 보입니다. 하지만 정언명령은 행위자가 스스로 규범을 세우고, 그리고 또 그 규범을 자신에게 되돌릴 수 있어야 한다는 전제를 가집니다. 그럼 여기서 저희 질문은 AI가 자기 법적 주체가 아니라면 정언명령은 AI 처벌을 철학적 근거가 될 수 있을지요? 결국은 논의의 초점은 AI를 처벌할 수 있는가 보다 AI에게 어떻게 책임을 기속할 것인가를 옮겨가야 하지 않을까? 저는 그렇게 생각합니다. 여기에 그 교수님의 의견은 어떠하신지요?
Firstly, unfortunately, I don't speak Korean and I don't understand Korean at all, so I'm so sorry. So I would like to answer for the question in English. Right, my title of my speech may suggest that I'm seeking and I'm treating categorical imperative as a possible justification to punishment. As you rightly observed, the AI is not self-independent moral agent. So I found another one solution and another one option of using categorical imperative. Because that principle, that maxim, that obeying that maxim, determinate the possibility of being moral agents. So a categorical imperative provides us information not for justification, for punishment, but providing justification for not punishing so far. I hope I express myself clearly, right? Do you have any question? Okay.
네, 그럼 이제 시간이 얼추 다 된 것 같아가지고요. 네, 이번 저희 첫 세션을 이제 마무리할까 합니다. 그래서 혹시라도 추가적으로 질문이나 또 이제 다른 의견도 있으신 분들은 저희 식사하시면서 의견 나누시면 좋겠다는 생각이 드는 것 같습니다. 이른 아침에도 불구하고 이제 자리해주신 저희 발표자분들과 그리고 이제 토론자 여러분께 감사드리며 그리고 공연을 들려주신 플로우의 많은 분들께도 진심으로 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 저희 세션은 그럼 이제 이것으로 본격적으로 종료를 하고요. 12시부터 저희가 2층 저 바로 옆에 있거든요. 레스토랑이 마련되어 있는데 점심 식사가 진행될 예정입니다. 이후에는 1시 반부터는 또 이제 대회식과 인간대화의 도전이라는 주제로 기존 강연이 진행이 있으니까 많은 분들 참석해 주셔가지고 자리를 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 이것으로 저희가 이번 세션 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.